Welcome to my channel. Today we're going to learn how to cook. And by the end of this video, you're going to be able to make delicious, amazing meals for yourself or for your family. And all that in under 25 minutes. You ready? Let's get started. Now, I'm not going to teach you the alphabet of cooking because you're not 3 years old. So let's dive right into it with step number 1. Get your equipment together. Now, I'm going to use 3 basic pots today, but you might need more or less depending on the recipe. A small pot is usually used for sauces or gravies. Medium pot can be used for pretty much everything. Large pot is mainly for stocks and soups where you need a lot of liquid or for when you're cooking for a crowd. The second piece of equipment that you're going to need is a pan. A pan is basically a flat bottom vessel that has a handle attached to it that allows you to move it around the stove. They come in different diameters and depths, which are referred to as their size or their capacity. Pans are mainly used for frying, sauteing, and for broiling. We have skillets, which are shallow, and they're used for frying eggs, pancakes, etc. We also have saucepans, which have sloping sides, and they're good for making sauces and gravies. We have frying pans, which are flat, and they're used for frying and sauteing. And finally, we have griddles, which are flat, and they're used for cooking multiple items at one time. For example, if you're making grilled cheese sandwiches, you would use a griddle. The next thing that you're going to need is sharp knives. Knives dull food, and dull knives are dangerous because they're harder to control. And remember, never put a knife down carelessly. Always point the blade towards you or away from someone else. Also, never leave a knife in a sink full of water. Knives lose their sharpness when exposed to moisture for long periods of time. Then you have cutting boards, which are either made out of wood or plastic. Plastic is lighter, it's cheaper, it doesn't dull knives as fast, and it's less likely to slip. Now I recommend getting one large cutting board so that you don't have to do dishes after you are done cutting. Finally, we have measuring tools. These are either dry or liquid, and you need them in both metric and imperial. There are many different types of measuring cups and spoons, and you should get all of them. Now, if your recipe only calls for 1.4 teaspoon of salt, don't go around the house looking for a 1.4 teaspoon. Instead, use a 1.2 teaspoon, then measure out half of it. Now let's talk about heat and how to control it. First, we need to identify the type of stove that we're using. In North America, we have 2 main types, those being electric and gas. Electric stoves have radiant coils that produce heat. They're easy to clean, they're safe, and they're ideal for low temperature cooking like simmering and baking. Gas stoves burn natural gas or liquid petroleum, and they require ventilation. They're excellent for high temperature cooking like searing or deep frying. Now, no matter what kind of stove that you have, it's important to know how to control the amount of heat that's produced. You can usually adjust the heat by turning a knob or pressing a button. Once your burner is on, you can determine the level of heat by observing the flame. If there's no flame, or if it's just a small flame, then the burner is off or it's on low. If the flame is medium sized, then it's on medium. And if the flame is large and it's roaring, then it's on high. Remember, you can always turn the heat down, but you can't turn it up once the liquid starts boiling. The next thing that you're going to need to know is how to measure ingredients. Measuring flour is very easy. Just take a measuring cup, spoon it out, then level it off using a straight edge. Measuring liquids is also very easy. Just pour the liquid into the measuring cup until it reaches the designated line, then either rotate the cup or use a spoon to get an accurate measurement. When measuring shorter ingredients such as sugar or salt, use a measuring spoon. Then if the ingredient is in a larger quantity, it's best to weigh it rather than measuring it. Now it's really important to get the right amount of each ingredient, because if you don't, the dish may not turn out correctly. Next, let's talk about cooking methods. There are 2 main categories of cooking methods, these being dry and moist. Dry cooking methods include broiling, grilling, baking, roasting, frying, and sauteing. Moist cooking methods include poaching, simmering, stewing, braising, and steaming. Now, it's really important to understand the difference between these 2 categories, because if you braise chicken, it will turn out very different than if you were to broil it. A great rule of thumb to follow is to use a dry cooking method for solid foods and moist methods for delicate foods. Let's start with broiling. This is a dry cooking method that uses direct, intense, radiant heat to cook food quickly. It's best for foods that are less than 1 inch thick, such as steaks, chops, burgers, fish, and vegetables. Place the food on a baking sheet. Then place it on the highest rack in the oven. The closer the food is to the heat source, the quicker it will cook. To prevent the food from burning, it's best to rotate the pan halfway through the cooking process. Broiling times vary based on the thickness of the food and the desired doneness. Now remember, carryover cooking is the increase in food temperature that occurs after you remove it from the heat source. Therefore, it's best to remove the food from the oven before it reaches the desired doneness because it will continue to cook while you're resting it. Alright, next we have baking. This is also a dry cooking method, and it uses indirect dry heat to cook food in its own juices or in a liquid. And this is best for solid foods that are over 1 inch thick. Examples include whole chickens, roasts, turkeys, and casseroles. Baking is done in a preheated oven and is very versatile. You can bake cakes, you can bake breads, you can bake cookies. So when baking, it's really important that the oven is preheated. That way you get even cooking throughout the entire food. The oven temperature will dictate the cooking time and the final result. For example, if you bake something at 350 degrees, it will take longer to bake than if you baked it at 400 degrees. Also, higher temperatures will brown food quicker and create more surface area for flavor development. Alright, next we have frying. Frying is a dry cooking method that uses a small amount of fat to cook food over high heat. Now, this is best for foods that cook quickly like fried chicken, french fries, and bacon. With frying, it's important that the fat is hot enough before adding the food. If the fat is not hot enough, the food will absorb too much of it and it will become greasy. Also, when frying, you need to maintain the temperature of the oil. You can do this by using a thermometer or by using the fry and test method. The fry and test method involves putting a small piece of food into the fat. If it sizzles vigorously, then it's ready. Another important thing to remember with frying is to never overcrowd the pan because that will lower the temperature of the fat. It's best to fry food in batches. Now, if you want to learn other cooking methods such as sauteing, grilling, broiling, or braising, you can check out my online culinary academy. The final thing that I want to discuss with you today is kitchen safety. One of the most common kitchen injuries is cuts and burns. Cuts can occur from mishandling knives, from broken dishes, or from poorly designed kitchen tools. Burns can occur from steam, from hot liquids, or from fire. To reduce the risk of injury in your kitchen, keep the areas around your stove and oven clean and free of clutter. Use rubber gloves when handling hot pots and pans. Don't attempt to move a hot pot or pan with a cloth or paper towel because those can catch fire. And finally, always keep an eye on what you're cooking. Never leave the kitchen unattended while cooking. And if a fire does break out, stay calm, turn off the heat source, smother the flames, and call the fire department. Congratulations, you now know the basics of cooking. Now it's time for you to get into the kitchen, start cooking, and don't forget to invite me to dinner. Until then, happy cooking.